Hey, welcome. Good to see you all. Did we turn the recorder on, Rana? Yeah. Is it on? Hey, welcome.
I got it for you.
Everyone. Hey, it's good to see you all. Welcome back to our time together. Namaste. Good to see you. Our admin today is Rana. Thank you, Rana, for adminning from South Carolina, right? Yes. Rock it out down there. And our co-host today is Amy Haible. Hey, Amy.
Hello, Bill.
Amy and I are both in Maine, and oh my God, it's so hot outside. 80 degrees. 80. We've been looking forward to this heat wave and grateful to have it. Thank you all for being here. I just got back from Canada. I was up there, as you may remember, I was up for the weekend. I did the Samadhi Center. We did a weekend of dyads, intense dyads. What a great time that was. It was so great. I just, I love to do it, things that are like really make a difference, intensives kind of thing. Let's see. I'm asking someone to mute. Okay, thanks.
I've got it.
And the intensive was just fantastic. But I also love the drive up, because when you have an 8.5 hour drive, you have time to just totally drop into whoever you want to listen to, and just, and be with them. And I chose Eckhart Tolle, 3.5 hours up and 3.5 hours back. And oh my God, I love that guy.
He's a good companion.
Yeah, he's funny. He's fresh, and he's mostly funny. He brings such a humor to the awakening things that happen, and he looks around and he's looking to make sure everyone, he looks around the audience, just making sure everyone is present in the moment, in the now.
Well, remember, Bill, he said, a course says, what was it? This world was created when someone forgot to laugh or something like that. The tiny mad idea, and it didn't get laughed off. Something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. He makes really great jokes about spiritual concepts and ideas that we play with. But this week we have some reasonable, I don't want to say that, make this seem like the other ones aren't reasonable, but these are really pretty simple discourses, right, Amy?
They are. And you know what, because they're so simple, maybe we could do a little bit more, if people want to raise their hands, we could do a little bit more Q&A if we have time. Just a thought that just came to me. Open
to that. And if you're following the schedule, there was a typo error. It said that this was discourse 211 to 210. That it should be 201 to 210 on the schedule. And sorry about that. And then I have some awesome news. I don't know if is Rick West in the house? Let's see if he's in. Rick, are you here? I don't see his name. No. He's not here. He's signed up to be a co-host.
Golly.
Everybody, put this in your calendar. Yeah, right. October 11th, he's going to be our co-host. We're going to see him in person, and he sent me an email. So October 11th, we're going to play with Rick West on the screen, and looking forward to that. And let's get started.
Okay.
201.
Here he's just defining life, thought, and feeling. And he says existence conditioned is quote unquote life. He's put life in quotes. So I think it's not big R reality life. It's life in quotes. And consciousness limited is thought. And then peace expressing itself is feeling. I like that last one. I think what these next few discourses point to is the natural state, which is happiness.
Yeah.
And so happiness is beyond mental pleasure. And I guess to find it, it means tracing the source of happiness you have enjoyed back to your real nature. And what he means by that is recognizing that your happiness does not involve objects, that it's a natural state, and that it arises as part of your I am consciousness, your I am being, your very being is happiness. And one of the things that I think is important to remember is he defines the ego as, maybe it's not him, not Atmananda. It might be Jean Klein, who says the ego is the thing that steps in there right after the thought arises and claims credit for it. And so
Right.
in this next thing, he talks about, the dog and the bone as the example. The dog tasting blood from chewing on the bone and thinks that the blood is in the bone. It doesn't realize it's coming from itself. And then, so it keeps chewing, and then it drinks until it's exhausted and leaves the bone. And exactly the same is the condition of the human being who hunts after objects of pleasure, encouraged by the glimpses that they occasionally seem to enjoy on contact with them. But they take the object to be the source of the pleasure enjoyed, and then they pursue objects with even more vigor. But they don't understand that the happiness is what's arising first. That's the natural state, and that's the direct. It's a direct expression of what we are, not in an object found.
Right. Right. Yeah. We're experiencing ourselves, not as a body, but we're experiencing our own presence, our own being, and immediately objectifying it, thinking that's causing this experience. Yeah. It's great. There's two things in the definitions of life, of thoughts and feelings, life, that are like A Course in Miracles. Consciousness is limited, is thought, and this would be the Course's definition of consciousness, not absolute consciousness, Atman, or presence, or just isness. This is the Course in Miracles definition of consciousness, that it's limited or that's egoic. And then peace expressing itself is feeling. In my mind, I mean, that's a very subtle definition, because peace isn't always felt. Peace often is. It's just is. So I don't know that that's but maybe I'm missing something. I often find peace just to be the same place as presence, and has no feeling qualities. And then other times it does. So I'm not sure. Be interesting to have others chime in on that. Yeah. And then let's see. Oh, and I thought that dog thing was very interesting, because you don't realize it gives such a description of how we're doing this. It's actually a disturbance to the body that's creating this experience.
Yeah.
that's so subtle that we miss that it's coming from us. It's just that was, I've never seen that dog example before, but
Yes.
it came to life.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like this comment that Holger has, peace is simply the absence of agitation. And that reminds me of a Francis Lucille quote, which, what does he say? He says, fullness is the absence of lack. It's the same kind of thought. Fullness is the absence of lack. So peace is the absence of agitation. And that again speaks to our true nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And how sitting quietly, pausing as awareness is of such a powerful antidote to agitation, or an antidote to being pulled into the emotional or the distracted experience of person that often is suffering. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes we have partners, we have disagreements with our partner, and that can cause agitation. And when I first started having an awakening experience, and I realized the power of pausing and just being present without saying anything, just pausing in my own stuff in the middle of a disagreement. Oh my God, you see so much more. And it has an instant calming effect for you. If you're willing to give it, 30 seconds or a minute, you can see the energy of the ego mind and the energy of conflict, and just the seeing of it in that causes it to diminish. Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you want to move to 202?
Sure. 202 asks, what is the goal of all desires? We've heard this lesson several times in the first 200 discourses that we've been through, but it is desirelessness. And here this is again confusing the object with happiness. And what he's saying here is that desire is a prelude to worldly pleasures, yet you enjoy pleasure only when the desire ceases. That is, when you reach the state of desirelessness. And then he says your desire for the object causes your body and your mind to be incessantly active in order to get the object, and it continues until you achieve it. But once you achieve it, you don't have any other object. You're sort of at a resting point. You naturally cease to your activity, and then the body and senses get relaxed. And he says the mind refuses to function, which is kind of an interesting way of putting it. The mind refusing to function. And at that stage, you're absolutely desirelessness. And then your true nature, your real nature of happiness shines by itself. And then soon after, the ego gets going again, and you start up again, and another object of desire arises again within your awareness. And so he says, happiness dawned only when desire changed into desirelessness. The goal of all desire is happiness with a capital H, since happiness with a capital H is achieved only by desirelessness. Desirelessness is the goal of all desires.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the awakening also. This is, because it takes, this is that old example of enlightenment occurs, or awakening occurs to those who want it so much. It's like someone that has their hair on fire that's looking for water. You really, the desire needs to be that kind of intensity. And yet it's not the desire, it's the desire that goes away when awakening occurs. So it requires a desire for as a kind of a lift off, the intensity of desire, but then the thing that is chasing after awakening, it has to dissolve before. So that's the same thing he's saying here. The desire dissolves and awakening occurs. Happiness is realized. So it's a paradox.
It is
You
a
need both.
paradox.
You have both. You have the desire is initiated by the ego, and yet the ego needs to go away for the experience to occur or to be realized.
Yep. You know, in listening to you sent the link for that YouTube interview to everybody. I assume so.
Oh,
So-
Michael James and Swami
Yes.
Priyananda.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put a plug in for that interview here, because they really talk about the ego in that interview, and it's very well described. And what they say is that the ego borrows its existence from the I am, from changelessness. It borrows its existence from that. All objects borrow their seeming existence from reality. And they describe the ego as being formless, and it's the formlessness of that's being borrowed from reality just before it comes into form. And so the ego is in between material form or gross form and reality. And I guess maybe Atmananda might call that the subtle body. I don't know. I'm sure Dr. Beale would know, or someone else here would know. But it's just, I think, important to keep that in mind. You know, what is the ego here? What are we talking about?
Yeah, it's a great interview, and that section is right. It's a 2-hour conversation between these two great teachings, and Michael James is really speaking more of the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, who he calls Bhagavan all the time, and Swami Priyananda is the director of Advaita in New York City. He's a monk, and they're both brilliant, and they speak about the ego right at the 55-minute mark in that 2-hour thing. And Rana said she'll post it, and and we Don mentioned. Okay, wait a minute. Don mentioned we didn't say anything about the discourse on 148 where Atmananda talks about the beetle. So maybe we want to look at that a bit just before we go to 202.
Okay.
And Jenny said the ego doesn't exist. It's never the same. It's the conceptualization made out of memory. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what in this conversation you'll see that what the way they reference it is the I am overlays itself on a false identity that we call ego, on the image, on the conditioned self identity that it gets overlaid. So they explain it just so simply and so clearly, and to hear it in half a dozen different ways can be helpful. This is just another way of hearing it.
They described ego as a false awareness. It's present it's a false awareness. It's present in waking and dreaming, but not in deep sleep. And then a questioner asks, why did the ego arise? And they say, why investigate that which does not exist?
There it is. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
gets back to
Yeah.
Jenny's statement. But
That was this, Amy, that was the thing that I loved hearing. I hadn't heard it before. I heard it come from either Michael James or Swami, that
Yep.
it was identified as the false awareness.
Yes.
Because how many of us think, oh, I'm me, I'm Bill, I'm aware of this and I'm aware of that. That's the false awareness. It's where awareness has assumed the body self identity. It's the false awareness. It's not, it's the localized awareness that
Right.
everyone assumes, oh, this is me. I'm aware of me, right? It's that one.
Exactly. Exactly. The localized awareness. I think that's a brilliant term that that Rupert uses, and I love that. It encapsulates it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rick West is in the house. Rick, I told everyone that you are our co-host on October 11th, and thank you for doing that, being part of this co-host thing. We see you typing for years on the board, and to have you on the camera, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Really great.
Yeah.
So 148.
Yep.
Yep. So 148, he just says, the human's hunting for happiness is just like a beetle with a drop of butter on its head, and getting the scent of the butter, the beetle hovers around, knocking about everywhere for the source of the scent, but is ignorant of the fact that the butter is on its own head. Likewise, the humans hunt for happiness because it's in themselves. It's in the human itself, and he's not able to see it there. But the urge which makes him hunt comes from that happiness itself. That's a good reminder. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
happiness seeking itself.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. And we're addicted to it because we can't get away from us.
No.
We're addicted to it in all of its different forms, whether you're a sex addict or a money addict or a food addict or just addicted to the body, personal self-identity. It's all of it is us seeking for us. It's
Yes.
me seeking for me.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's not me. It's
No.
me that's you.
It's the big me, or
Yeah.
the big S self, the big S self.
Yeah. Yeah. The big ass self. That's that is definitely coined by Amy Haible.
Yeah, I have to call out my friend John Moulton, who anyway, he's the one that
funny.
coined that one. But
Okay.
all right, so are we on 203?
203.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to raise their hand to chime in, we're plugging right along here. So
Go right ahead. Put your hand up and jump in.
So this one we've also heard before, and I think this is an important one. He says, Jnana Sadhaka, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is an aspirant that's undergoing training. So a seeker who's undergoing their training from a guru, who's heard the truth from the guru, in the course of their attempt to establish themselves in the truth, may sometimes casually be thrown into the nirvikalpa state, which is it's a temporary state of bliss or consciousness, but it's not the full state. It's not the enduring state. And it has a sense of intense happiness, but the caution here is not to become careful, not to get caught or fascinated by the enjoyment part of the experience. Otherwise, it might enslave the aspirant and thereby retard their progress.
Yep. I had two, I went to that intensive, the dyad intensive at the Samadhi Center over the weekend. And I watched both of those happen. I watched one fella have an awakening and just erupt into just loud and intense laughter. And he was like ecstatic. It was uncontrollable. He was in just this total state of laughter. And there's another dozen or 14 people having their dyads, and he's over there in the corner just he was just blown away. His mind was blown. He had to sit out for a few hours before he was containable again. And then on the last day of this intensive, this other woman who I'd sat with several times, she just went into this total quiet presence, and she couldn't speak. She was in this absolute quiet presence with this, glow of joy and presence on her face. It was just both extremes of what we just read. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
And when I came across this for our time together, I went, oh my God, I saw both of those yesterday or Sunday.
Wow.
One Saturday and the other one Sunday. It was amazing. And it was true. Both of them happened. And a teacher will tell you, just as Atmananda is saying, don't give attention to that. The ego wants a repeat of that often, wants to have, that experience happened and I want it again. And that's the warning right here.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Jenny says, there's no enduring state of consciousness. Consciousness is always present. Nirvikalpa samadhi is consciousness without objects. There are other examples of this. None can persist. The only purpose of consciousness without objects is to show the difference between mind, which is temporary, and consciousness, which isn't.
All right, Dr. Beal, that's a good one. Thank you. Yeah, that's really good.
No enduring state of consciousness. It's always present. Nirvikalpa is consciousness without objects. Other examples of this, none can persist. The only purpose of consciousness without objects is to show the difference between mind, which is temporary, and consciousness, which isn't. Mind is temporary and consciousness isn't. Thank you.
So it's a contrast that's bringing attention to that which is changeless.
Yes.
That which is always present, what Jenny just said.
Yes. Yes. Mm. One of the things that the YouTube really showed me very clearly was the level of not detail, but the level of depth, the layers of truth to these teachings. They're so, it's just like peeling back an onion.
And finding gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carol said, is that the seeming oscillation? And I would say yes. That's what. Yeah, perfect. It seems to be an oscillation. And this is also the experience that people have when they have awakening experiences or glimpses, and it lasts for a while, and then they gradually sink back into the sleeping state, or the personal self-identity. It just sort of slips back. You slip back into old memory, and they go, well, how can I maintain this? how often have we heard someone ask a teacher? I hear it almost every time I hear a teaching. Someone asks the teacher, how can I stay present as awareness? How can I stay as present? And that's a hard one, because it's actually the ego that's asking the question.
Right. And that was also brought up in the YouTube. Someone's a student complains that there's so much work to do. We have to keep working, and we can't stay in our meditation. And the response is, that's not what it's a living teaching. It's a living teaching. It's an alive teaching. It happens in the world.
Yeah. So 204, how does Vedanta influence one's life and activities?
Yes. The other thing in the YouTube is it's Vedanta, and the history of Vedanta, its origins are really beautifully described. But so this says the mind is responsible for all worldly activities. Therefore, the question comes to this: how does Vedanta influence the mind? The mind can't exist by itself, but only on some stronger support. That's the dharmi and the dharma that we talked about last week, the container. Formerly, the ego served to support and direct all the activities of the mind. But when the ego is no more, the mind has only the absolute I principle to depend upon. And on that background, the mind can never go astray. So this is what the daily work is. It's the ego has to continuously be seen in the light, brought to the light, brought to the light, brought to the light. Because it's borrowed from reality. So it's brought to the light and brought to the light, and then it just dissolves in the light. But for most of us who aren't fully continuously awake, the ego is its own teacher in a way. It keeps bringing us back and bringing us back to what we're not, until the I am presence, within the I am presence that we keep coming back to, it just dissolves within that. And he says that the Vedantin always lives in strict conformity with the laws of state, society, and community. He finds nothing to be gained by going against them. On the other hand, by obeying these laws, he at least sets an example to the ignorant people, to whom it would do immense good, because these laws tend to bring about human justice, and this in due course would lead one to divine justice, which is peace itself.
Right.
And then, yeah.
And it's like it seems it's kind of like self-help, or the structure of self-help is good, or can be good, yet it's only a bridge. And a lot of people they stay on the bridge or on the loop.
Yeah. Yes. Well, as one of my teachers said, it happens until it doesn't.
Right.
So
Jenny said it's trying to stay there in that state. That is the problem. It means that it has been conceptualized as a state.
Yes. And she also says, you don't need to see the ego. Just ask the question, what do I believe myself to be in this moment right now? And that's the direct.
Yeah.
The direct way. Yeah.
Yeah. To analyze the ego is a total waste of time that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
With that question, the idea of ego dissolves, right?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I used to belong to the Jung Society here in Brunswick, and they were always talking about the ego and how a healthy ego, blah, blah, blah. And I finally I had to leave because I kept saying there is no healthy ego. That's its function. It's not healthy. It's never going to be healthy.
It is, though. It is. There is a healthy ego. It is the experience of awakening, because this body is an ego identity. It's a seeming entity that doesn't exist, and a healthy one is one that knows that it doesn't exist.
It's evaporated.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. It just seems like, because this is happening, right? Is this not healthy?
Wow. Okay. Here, Jenny says the apparent ego is an act of God. Now, that I think we could spend a whole class on that one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I remember when I read that line in the course to Rupert in person in San Francisco. Rupert, what do you think about this sentence? Into eternity, where all is one, there crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. And Rupert, he looked so curious at that line of a statement. And he said, God is not mad. It was funny. It was a good response. He then added to that an explanation. It was brilliant. There's a YouTube video on it somewhere, but it was funny. Yeah,
that's a good one, though. That's a good one.
Yeah.
The apparent ego is an act of God. It has to be. It can't be anything else.
It can't.
So,
yeah.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course. Hi,
Hey, Belle.
Susan.
So back to Jenny's comment, the apparent ego. I'm not sure. Can we talk more about what that means?
On board with that?
Apparent ego. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm on board with it or not, because I'm not sure I'm understanding. Is the apparent ego something different than another type of ego? I think that adjective, the apparent, is, I'm not sure. I haven't heard it. I haven't heard the ego. I haven't heard that in terms of the ego before. So I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, maybe
the
Jenny
ego
could.
is an act of God. Jenny, you
And
want
an act of God. Yeah.
I mean,
yes, ego is apparent. There's no other type of ego. They're all fictitious. They don't exist. So I'm by using the epithet apparent, I'm at the same time making that clear. But the fact that we feel that we are a separate entity, that feeling in one moment, which is not really ego, because ego doesn't exist, but that feeling is an act of God, because all of our feelings, all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, everything is an act of God. No, there's nothing that isn't an act of God.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
great
Thank you both.
discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. When I mean, here's where the hard problem, the hard kind of idea hits. So God is, is a murderer. God is a rapist. God is a Hitler. God is a Putin. Yes, all of those. Everything is God. Yeah. And that's why the teaching can be so helpful, because if you can come to, I mean, when you can swallow that, you wouldn't tell someone that's just coming on the path. They just couldn't swallow that, or anyone that's not on the path. They say, "You're crazy, man. That's you need to go lock yourself up."
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, it is the essence of the, or it is the absolute truth that God is everything, and nothing and everything,
Yes.
formless and
Yes.
still everything.
Well, and that's why I love, and I thought Rupert had come up with this, but obviously Atmananda really uses the analogy of the screen. Only consciousness really exists, and the reality isn't what's the image that's being displayed upon the screen. So Hitler is an image on a screen. The rapist is an image on a screen, and that's very hard for most people to really comprehend and accept until they've done the other, until they understand the deeper teaching.
Right.
It's really hard, and it's hard to live that too. Even though you may know it up here, it's hard to live it.
In my mind, it's the blessing of all blessings, because it means in reality, everything is pure. In reality, all of these things have an absolute nature, eternal presence nature, and it lives in the no judgment zone and the no guilt zone, and it's just absolute pure presence and love. So in my mind, it's a sanctuary of thought.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thou doth protest too much. It is the easiest, all else is hard.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Paul. Absolutely right. Thou doth protest too much. That is correct. So,
Carol said, wait, just before we go on, Carol said, we created ego to experience, to be dreaming of separation. It is also our chosen alarm clock. Yes. Yeah. It's God. Go ahead.
Eckhart Tolle does say that suffering is a great teacher, which, the ego is suffering. And so he does, he doesn't mean that literally, but there is a certain truth to that.
Look at Jenny's statement there. Right? It's the drama of life. If everything was always wonderful and everyone behaved perfectly, it would be a boring drama.
Who wants a boring drama?
Right.
Okay.
Well, and when you're on the side that understands these things, it's awesome, because you know that it's really just a play in life, and it's not everyone is total love. The murderer, the priest, the president, the soldier, the snake, everything is God. The animal that eats another animals, everything is God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Byron Katie talks about losing her vision and walking down her hallway to answer the door or something and falling over herself and just laughing about it because, oh my gosh, look what just happened. Isn't that interesting? How fun.
How fun. Okay, so let's go on.
These next couple of discourses, really 204 and 205 and at least 204 and 205 really are sort of bringing us back into the real world and talking about the code of ethics and and the laws of this world. And so just ending 204, he says, looking from another angle of vision, you see that when you stand as the witness in all your activities, you become disinterested and free. And this disinterestedness is clearly and naturally reflected and expressed in all your activities. And he carries that thought into 205, the goal of ethics. And he explains that ethics always has unselfishness as its goal, but witnesshood takes you even further and makes you selfless or egoless. So when you stand as the witness, you have actually transcended all ethics, which is how he ended the previous discourse. So he clarifies that ethics belongs to the realm of the mind alone, and the witness stands beyond it. So one who's reached the witness does not stand to gain anything by following the laws of ethics. They do have
You froze, Amy.
Hopefully she'll be right back.
however, observe them mechanically
There she
through
is.
habit, just to set an example.
Right. You froze, Amy.
Oh, I did?
Yeah.
Whoops.
Right at he or you said he, however, and I say he or she, however, observes them mechanically through habit just to set an example to the ignorant.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now you're freezing a little bit on my screen. So
Oh,
maybe it's me.
Yeah, it's on your end, Amy.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
if it gets too bad, I'll bow out and
Come back.
come back.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So ready to go to 206?
Yep. Yep.
206 is at the same level in which you get attached. You can never get detached. So he says detachment is to be gained not by being detached from a few of the objects perceived, but from the whole world of objects, which manifests itself in that level as an integral whole. So here it's just as he's saying with the laws of ethics, you really rise above the laws as the witness. And it's the same thing. Detachment rises above the whole world of objects. In other words, you are to become detached from that level itself that you were originally attached. That can never be achieved by confining yourself to that level alone, the level you are attached to, nor is it possible to become detached from all objects separately, one by one. Therefore, the only means to gain complete detachment is for the subject, to take a stand in a higher plane or level, and from there view the world. Then you will see that the former world, with all its questions arising in its own level, altogether disappears. And that's kind of like the ego seeking but never finding. It's the same thing. You have to rise above the level of the ego. It will never find what it seeks.
And that for me, it's that is primordial awareness. That is just presence. It's being with no noise, no label, no. There's nothing and there's everything. It's the witness of experience, not the observer.
Right.
Yeah.
So he just says that's how attachment in the dream world is transcended, is by rising to another level, to being the witness.
Yeah. And I think that's also, you could say, true meditation. True meditation isn't watching the breath. It's being the witness of watching the breath.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So Rick says, analyze less and notice more.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Awakening occurs, according to Krishnamurti, when the analyzer and the analyzed are realized as one. Yeah.
So
Dave, Dave Adams says, from you are the happiness you seek. Oh, this is from Rupert's book. The temporary self that we seem to be feels very real because it is real. Its reality is ever present, unlimited awareness. All that is unreal, or more accurately, illusory about it, are the limitations we ascribe to it. These limitations are imaginary. They are superimposed by thought onto the reality of our self. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I love that book. That was an awesome book study too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meditation is synonymous with being. Thank you, Rick. Yeah, I love that. It's not a doing, it's a being.
Yes. Yes. And what did Francis Lucille say? Something to the effect that what seems to be limited is all occurring in unlimited mind, or not mind, but in the unlimited. So,
Yeah. And you want to move to 207?
yeah. The heart in different planes. The spiritual heart is of no gross material stuff, and so it cannot be located in space. Still, to satisfy the lower adhikaris, which are, an adhikari is a spiritual aspirant with a lower level of understanding. So to satisfy the lower adhikaris in the gross plane, it's conventionally located in the right-hand side of the chest. But in the subtle plane, the heart is the integral I thought, formless, the center of all thoughts. And beyond it, the heart is in the right absolute. I love that, the right absolute. I think that's such a wonderful term.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's in the understanding of being. Like,
Yes.
like I am presence. It's an understanding. It's not located somewhere.
Yes. Yes. And then he goes to visualization in 208. And this is very brief, but it might engender some conversation. He says, visualization is there when the effect that is produced in seeing is produced by the depth of understanding. So I think what he's saying there is awareness influences what is visualized. My goodness, awareness determines what is visualized. It's always, always, always in the understanding.
Yeah, it is. It always is. We could put three more. It's always, 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 always. Visualization is there when the effect that is produced in seeing is produced by the depth of understanding. It's where the knowing comes in, and it just kind of informs the mind that is now under the influence of being, of the heart, the mind that is no longer the mind no longer is superimposed with the localized false awareness. It's dissolved that overlay, and it's open to intuitive divine intelligence to speak through it.
Yes.
As it.
Yes. Yes. And he could have used the term when the effect that is produced in perceiving is produced by the depth of understanding as well as in seeing. But
right.
Yeah.
Good one. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So
okay,
now,
going to astrology. What does Atmananda say about astrology?
it's really interesting. I don't know a lot about Indian astrology, but what I do know is pretty interesting. But he says he's asked about the efficacy of it, and he goes to another teacher and says, Guru Nathan, Guru Nathan, is that the Buddha? Someone knows that answer.
I don't think so.
It's not the Buddha.
This is a different one.
Okay.
I think this is another Indian guru.
So he
Oh,
says,
it's him? Oh, this is Atmananda? Okay.
no, is it Atmananda or is it the Buddha?
Drum roll. It's
That's
Atmananda.
Atmananda. Okay.
Okay.
That's interesting the way they put that. So what he says is that in establishing the relationship of cause and effect, which is what astrology, in my understanding, really does try to do, establishing the relationship of cause and effect reduced to the terms of their source, time. In these calculations, many other things have also to be taken into consideration. If all these are given due consideration, the predictions will mostly be correct. And he's speaking about for the average person. Relating to the body alone, facts relating to the body alone can thus be predicted successfully. Facts regarding the Sharira Yatra, the journey of the body, as they technically call it. Even here, sometimes it goes wrong. Whenever consciousness from beyond the realm of the mind brings to bear its influence upon the activities of the body, either directly or indirectly. So here he's talking about a consciousness that is beyond
The laws of time and space.
It's beyond the laws of time and space, right? Some larger activity that is acting on the laws of time and space. So when a sage's thoughts in any way intervene from beyond the limitation of time, the predictions fail. So when you go beyond the gross body, the journey of the body. And he says, therefore, with regard to the life of yogins or sadhakas progressing under a sage, good astrologers refuse usually to predict anything. Here, something other than the body element from beyond the body level comes into operation. And then he gives a quote which says, if your free will becomes predominant in your activities, you gradually transcend the conditioning activities influencing from the past.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. It's interesting that what it seems to be saying is, objects do influence time and space. And that's how the ocean is affected by the moon and gravity, and those influences, they influence us somehow.
Yes.
And yet consciousness trumps all of that. And this goes, if you watch the Awakening Mind documentary, or when you watch the full interview that we did with Donald Hoffman, he said that when science understands that and really has theory that understands that consciousness is fundamental to reality, then we don't need to go through time and space. We'll go around time and space. It will be an interface activity. It will no longer be a fundamental, an idea that we think is the starting point or the fundamental starting point of our experience in time and space. So anyway, this means if your free will or your true nature becomes predominant in your activities, you gradually transcend your karmas. So this is how awakening and understanding your true nature actually will change the trajectory of your human experience. When you live in your true nature, karmas become they become a less impacting your human experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Jenny's comment, there's only one actor, consciousness. And she says, I think he's referring to patterns in body and mind. And after enlightenment, the conditioning reduces. I totally get that, but I don't really, I get that, but how exactly it relates to astrology.
So Jenny, don't you think in the play of time and space that the movements of the planets are affecting the time and space experience?
No, I don't think there's any evidence to that. I mean, he's talking to someone who obviously believes in Indian astrology. Certainly, the planets and the movement of them do affect time and space. We know that gravity, scientifically, gravity affects both time and space, or space-time. But I think to relate it to an individual body-mind, I don't think there's any real evidence for that. There's certainly a lot of evidence that what astrologers do is pick up feelings from a body-mind and then are actually trying to interpret that. I mean, maybe knowingly or maybe unknowingly, they interpret that in the light of movements of the planets that they can see. But there's so much scope for making those movements mean whatever you want them to mean.
Yeah, but in the planetary movements, galaxies, all of that, it's no different. It's still the play of consciousness that is managing all of that at a macro and a micro level of experience. Is still consciousness in play with itself, right?
Exactly, and of course we shouldn't forget that it's only our conceptualization of the movements of the planets and the galaxies and so on. It's not reality. If there is a thing in itself, which is a galaxy or a planet, probably it would be something totally different. And that's what Don Hoffman is referring to when he talks about we only see through a virtual reality headset.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. You know, it is, I don't know if anyone on the Zoom call has ever read Richard Tarnast. Are you either one of you familiar with him, Bill or Jenny? He's a very well-renowned historian, and I forget the name of the book, but he took a whole series of events through history and put them into a data profile, and then combined it with the movement of the planets and showed it, according to him, that that certain larger social movements actually did correspond to some of the things that we attribute to certain planetary interactions. And
you have to be really careful about that, Amy. I was trained as a statistician, and there's no end of false correlations, false statistics that's there. It's very hard. It's hard even for statisticians to get things right. But for non-statisticians, for people who haven't been trained deeply in statistics, and there's loads of them, they write books about these things, but you can't take them as being accurate.
Yeah, I hear that. I definitely do. And really, all of it is just a level of seeking. It's not.
It's the mind wanting to superimpose patterns.
Yes.
Because that's the only way it can make sense of the universe, is by superimposing patterns on it. But to say that those patterns correspond to reality, again, is also not absolute truth.
So it's making meaning, trying to make meaning.
Yeah.
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 It's like the body-mind experience analyzing itself, trying to figure out consciousness. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
actually, even Atmananda said it right there in the second paragraph when he said that the facts relating to the body alone can be predicted successfully, as they technically call it. Even here, sometimes it goes wrong. So it's not reliable. It's just it's a mind that's seeking the absolute. It'll never be found.
It is interesting, though, that he chooses to address this topic. And in that second paragraph, he does seem to give it some substance. He's can be successful, thus predicted can be successful. So it's just kind of an interesting aside. Yeah.
So it actually answers everything we just said, because sometimes sometimes it's correct and people all jump on and say, see, here's verification. See how this all matches and lines up, and yet it's not reliable. Yeah, interesting. So let's look to 210. We have about 7 minutes left.
So does unselfishness help you transcend the mind? And what he's getting at here is that unselfishness is truly pleasurable. If you investigate unselfishness, it's a pleasurable thing. He says, every time you do an act in strict conformity with ethical laws, you know on the surface that it takes you to the unselfish part. But if you examine the same act carefully, you will find that every such act takes you even further to the real background beyond the mind's plane. The glimpse of your real nature expresses itself as pleasure when you come back to the mind's level, but this you immediately attribute to the mind's activity just preceding it, which is what the ego does. It steals it's the clown taking the bow for the whole play.
Yeah.
He said, hence you miss the spiritual values of the communion with your real nature. So in every act called good or virtuous, there is a grain of self-sacrifice, however small. And I'm not sure exactly what he means by that, except the way that I looked at it, it's a small self-sacrifice. Because the big self can't sacrifice anything, doesn't sacrifice anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jenny said, I think by unselfishness, he means impersonal.
Impersonal.
Yeah. So how does the impersonal help you to transcend the mind? Yes. Yeah. Well, this was an easy to connect the dots group of discourses. I sometimes they're just they're a mouth and a mind full. This one was bite-sized. I really enjoyed it, and I loved your support for it, Amy and Jenny and Rick and Paul and Holger and all of you that participated, Susan, and thank you for everybody for being in the game today so fully. It was awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I always learn myself when I do these. I mean, part of the reason it's so much fun is because I learn so much from everyone else. And I love the chat board because it's just so illuminating and freeing in so many ways. It's a great way to interact.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I always say thank you to all the chatters, as Paul says.
Susan, were you going to say something? Your mic is open.
You know what? I was just going to quickly say, if there's any Paul Simon fans out there, his new album is called 7 Psalms. And in 7 Psalms, he talks about what we were talking about before, that God is everything. God is the desert. God is COVID. God is the poverty in the street. God is the food that's fed to the poor. So when I heard that, if you listen to the album over and over, and he starts up by saying, God is my engineer, he's definitely been doing some work in this area, because the lyrics are just right on with what we've been talking about. So I just wanted to let you guys know that if there's any Paul Simon fans out there, it's his newest album, 7 Psalms. Quite beautiful.
Seven Psalms with a P.
7 Psalms with a P. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
look forward to listening, finding that. Thank you.
Quite stunning.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all for being here today for this book study. This was awesome again. And next week, we're going to have Jenny Sheehan. She thought she was going to be off for July, but she is back on. So she'll be our co-host next week. And we still have a couple of open spots. Please check the schedule and see where the open spots are. If you want to jump in, don't be shy. Love to have a new co-host if that's you and you feel the pull. And again, thank you, Rick West, for taking October 11th. I'll put you on the schedule. And you guys are awesome. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Love to everybody.